Welcome back, folks. This is Sprues and Studs, and today we're going to be doing a non-standard type of video. And this video is actually inspired by some of the comments that I've received in the review videos in recent past, where I'm basically too critical about JoyToy or McFarlane with regards to their paint quality on their action figures. So I was thinking, you know what? I may be actually a little bit unfair to them. So in order to make things fair, how about I turn this critiquing back onto myself and see exactly what the man in the mirror shows? So there are 3 miniatures in the past that I kind of wanted to take a look at and revisit to see if my own paint quality actually holds up to my current standards. The first 2 are something that I painted back in 1996 and 1997 respectively. And those miniatures, first is an old school Caldus Assassin, and the second one is of a Vindicare Assassin that I won first place in a local painting contest way back when, and the third and final one is of a Blood Angels Space Marine Tactical Squad Sergeant, and I painted that one back in 2018 when I got back into the Warhammer universe. So let's take a look at the paint quality and see if I myself am able to live up to my own critiques and expectations. All right, folks, ahead of you is a Caldus Assassin that I painted back in 1996 during my teenage years. And let's see if this actually stands up to my critiques right now. As I'm looking at this miniature right now and the Catan face knife, so there is a transition from this dark area to a mid-tone to a light silver. I did not know how to wet bend back in the day, so I can actually see that there are some rough transitions that are happening over here as well as over here that might be a little bit hard to see on the camera. And with this node over here, there was no effort into putting the blue glow that you typically see. This is still a miss in my opinion. With regards to the skull area itself, looks like I did a pretty good job of making sure that the shade stayed within the eye sockets as well as the nostrils. And I actually did put shading throughout the teeth area. And then as I'm looking at this area down here, I did actually have some bleed from the skull color onto the black of the sin skin. And I also think that I should have actually put some more color in this area of the face sword because it's black and you need some differentiation of detail. So looking at the most prominent area of this model is the hair, and it looks as if that there is some sort of shading that's involved over here, as you can see in between the lines, but there is no highlights whatsoever, which is a miss in my opinion. There should be highlights over here to make this thing stand out a little bit. So then with the eyes, as I've nitpicked before, while they are within the lines, I don't really like how these eyes look because they look flat. I like the eyes with like the silver lenses and stuff. And then with the sin skin right now, there is absolutely no highlighting whatsoever. So it looks very, very dull to me. And I could have used a lot of highlighting to make this model stand out more than it is, because right now it does not stand out at all. And then finally, looking at this loincloth area, there is shading, as you can see here. There's also some highlighting up here. So it doesn't actually look that bad in my opinion. The dry brushing on the neural shredder looks a little bit messy to me because I obviously dry brushed this. And with dry brushing, you get a little bit of bleeds. So there are some issues where this green area over here should have been a little bit cleaner. So let me show you in comparison what I'm capable of now compared to the old school one. So here I have the recently painted Caldus Assassin that features highlighting, shading, wet blending. So I've definitely progressed over the years in my painting quality and painting skill, and you see plenty of highlights that are going on. So that is the Caldus Assassin. All right, folks, ahead of you is the award-winning Vindicare Assassin. And just by looking at it right now, it looks very dull, and I kind of wonder why I actually won. So along this gun barrel, I definitely missed areas in which I could have put highlights on. This model doesn't have a lot of highlights, if at all, on it, which again is a miss in my opinion. And then with these black areas up here, I should have at least highlighted these areas some kind of light gray, so it'll make it stand out a little bit more. So looking at the scope area, looks like I did a pretty good job of painting this crosshair. It looks like it's pretty even. However, the red is not the correct red. You need some sort of lens to make this stuff pop out. And then looking at the silver areas, there isn't any highlights. There isn't any highlights over here on these wires. No highlights up top whatsoever either. So that's a bit of a disappointment to me. Looking at the holster here, again, no highlights whatsoever. So this thing is painted well within the lines, and I'm actually pretty impressed with the paint quality with these bullets here, where the red is staying within the red, the blue is within the blue, so it looks very clean over here. And then with the knife down here, no highlights whatsoever. And looking at the skull down here, it appears that the highlights that I put over here are uneven. So the blacks of the eye sockets is staying within the area. So at least this is clean, but this is uneven shading down here. In this area down here with the knife handle, it looks again fairly dull, and there is definite shading, as you can see these striations, but there's no highlighting whatsoever. So these two models definitely need highlights in order to make it pop. And I will show you what I am capable of now. And this is the modern version of the Vindicare Assassin. As you can see, there is a lot more pop, there's a lot more highlighting, there's a lot more shading and more detail that I have put into it. And even with the tassel on this, you can see the different highlights that are going on here. So that's it for the Vindicare Assassin. And finally ahead of you is the Blood Angels Sergeant that I painted back in 2018 when I got back into the miniature painting hobby. So let's see what's going on with this one. So taking a look at this area, the highlights over here are pretty thick and heavy-handed. Same thing with the highlights over here. They're super thick and super heavy-handed. I think that I should have actually made this thinner on this side, perhaps exactly like how it is on this side. So I did use a two-stage highlight of a lighter red and an even lighter red. So this side looks right, but it looks too thick on this side. And let's take a look at the arm area of the pauldron. It looks pretty clean to me. So you have shading going on with the purity seal and then the highlights up top. Same thing with the purity seal ribbons. I follow the same technique of edge highlighting here. So there's definite shading that you see here and then highlights up here. So this is pretty good in my opinion. And then turning this around, so looking at the other side, we have the chainsword, and it looks like there's a blob that was missed over here, a little bit too heavy-handed with the highlighting, and apparently I didn't do a very good job of highlighting this blade edge over here. This blade edge should have been highlighted a light gray, and it's kind of highlighted over here, but it's not prominent enough. And then looking at the tassels and stuff, it is properly shaded. There's highlights that are involved. Up here, looking at the pauldron, it looks pretty decent. You have shading here and then highlighting up top. Same thing with this area too. This looks pretty good to me, where you've got the shading down in these recesses of these robes and down here, and then lighter highlights up here. So this looks pretty good. Taking a look at the backpack, that's not that bad at all. You've got a two-stage highlight up top here, although I think it might be a little bit too thick, but it's certainly passable for sure. And then looking at the loincloth, it is a little bit unbalanced in my opinion. So the shading down here is perfectly fine, but the blending is not very good. You have a very rough transition from this dark shaded area to this lighter area up top over here. So that definitely could have been improved on. Then moving on down here with the leg area, it's pretty much the same. So you have pretty thick highlights here. I would have preferred it if it would have been a little bit thinner. And then as I'm turning this thing around too, the shading between the armor plates is still a little bit uneven and rough. You've got some areas in which it's pretty thick up here, super thin here, and then gradually thickens up again. So that's a little bit of a miss too. So folks, that is the critique of myself. Let me wrap this up in my final thoughts. All right, folks, what are my final thoughts on the quality of the paints of the miniatures that I painted back in the day with these two, as well as when I got reintroduced back into the hobby. Granted, I was 20 to 30 years younger than I am now, and I obviously know a lot more painting techniques, and I have better brushes, and I have access to more paints. These two right here, the Caldus Assassin as well as the Vindicare Assassin, are actually very lacking in my opinion. The Caldus Assassin, again, does not have a lot of highlights to it. There are some areas in which I have missed that's a little bit messy. And then with the Vindicare Assassin, this is supposed to be a miniature that I actually won in a local painting contest, #1. But the thing is, as I'm looking at it right now, it probably should not have won. There are very little to no highlights whatsoever on both of these things. So as I'm looking at these miniatures, they look pretty dull in my opinion, and there's nothing that makes these things pop out. So the only miniature that I can actually say that stands the test of time is the Blood Angels Sergeant, as you can see. I see some flashes of brilliance over here as I started highlighting and shading a lot more, especially highlighting. However, the highlighting was a little bit heavy-handed and thick, and I actually did miss some highlights on this miniature. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed me roasting myself and the past miniatures that I have made. I can turn a critical eye and look upon myself as well and rip myself a new asshole. and I'm not afraid of doing that. So let me know what you think of this video and what I could have possibly done better. And if you actually want to see more videos of this roasting myself. So this is Sprues and Studs. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.